So you had something, you wrote about Islam in America and George Washington's interaction with Islam.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, so there's a set of primary documents that are, most of them are held at in Mount Vernon, where his estate was, and he had a beautiful correspondence with the Sultan of the Barbary states, let's call it the Barbary Empire, which is modern day, Libya, Tunisia, North Africa.
Yeah.
And he had a back and forth correspondence with the Sultan, and it was very productive. It was very constructive.
Wow.
He was also president when the Treaty of Tripoli, or the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, was initiated with, again, the Barbary states.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read this historical document, but it literally says, like, the United States is not a Christian nation. We hold no enmity or hatred towards Muslims. So that's the statesman. Wow. That's the statesman in him. But there's also another primary document. It was written in 1783, in his own handwriting, and he was actually writing about issues pertaining to religious freedom, and he was writing to a friend, and at the end of the letter he said, this is a country that has a vision, and this vision is to accept Jews and Muslims and Hindus, and there's also historical records, and let's just be honest, he was a slave owner.
Yeah.
And the scholarship suggests that some of these slaves were either Muslim or they were descendants of Muslims. So you had names popping up in the records of the plantation, like Fatima or Fatima, and like Little Fatima. And there's an individual who was actually quite close with George Washington. His name was Sambo Anderson, and he was from West Africa. And based on what we know of his life and some of the tribal markings we had on his face, there's a pretty good chance that he was from a Muslim family.
Wow.
So, people forget that Muslims have been on this soil, this very land, way before this country even existed.
Yeah, definitely.
And digging into that history, I think, is really important, not because we need to just learn about Islam and Muslims, but we need to learn about our own country, because this is our country.
Yeah.
And it's a diverse country as well.
Captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere.
Yes, you lay the evils of slavery at the feet of the king, but you say nothing of slavery itself, sir. Now, surely, if the trade is outlawed but ownership is not, then those unfortunate Negroes still in servitude will become a more lucrative commodity.
Well, that's not what I intended, Dr. Franklin. Slavery is an abomination and must be loudly proclaimed as such, but I own that neither I nor any man has any immediate solution to the problem.
Oh, but 'tis no matter. The issue before us is independence and not emancipation.
Dr. Franklin, this document is
something our friends in the Congress will debate, but I would be very surprised if they will countenance an attack on slavery.
So when we say "Make America Great Again,"
what does that mean?
It had those pluralistic roots, and now there's kind of this totally different meaning associated with that. And through the process that you described, maybe that's something that we can kind of resurrect and bring back. So what do you see as kind of the current state of affairs between Muslims and Christians, Islam and Christianity in the United States, and kind of what's the outlook?
I'm an optimist, always, for the most part. So, despite all the rhetoric that that's unfolding around us, for every bigot, I think you have a beautiful soul that wants to engage, that wants to love, that wants to build bridges. We just don't hear about these stories, right? Because they don't bleed. If it doesn't bleed, it doesn't bleed, and it's not seen in the media.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the morning that I saw an article about a group of Muslims who had bought 30 acres and were planning to build a complex. When I saw that, my stomach kind of tightened up. They were going to be right across the street from us. I felt that ignorance and that fear. So I prayed. I said, Lord, what are we supposed to do?
We did not expect to be welcomed. We thought we have to work hard. And one day we were driving by and we see a banner. And that banner says,
Heart Song Church, welcomes the Memphis Islamic Center to the neighborhood. We had done coat drives and food drives, and close to 9/11, we do a blood drive together.
I would have never thought that I would be friends with Muslims. Right here. And I love it. It's kind of like my world got bigger.
We are better congregation now. We are better people because of this friendship with Heart Song.
I mean, we do know, there have been studies, like, there does seem to be a little bit of tension at the moment between evangelicals and Muslims, which is unfortunate, and it's also something we need to kind of keep an eye on, because evangelicals have a massive population in this country. And, they also have a lot of political clout and cultural clout and all that stuff. So pastors, a lot of pastors, even in Texas, one of my colleagues and friends, Bob Roberts from Dallas, like he's an evangelical, and he is leading the charge. He's one of the people leading the charge to build stronger bridges. So
very cool.
Like, we need to remind people of positive stories between Christians and Muslims, because it is not all bad. There are good stories, and if we just kind of focus a bit more on the good stories, maybe the narrative can change. So I'm optimistic.
Totally. Yeah. A lot of the ideas that we come up with come from our own kind of echo chambers, and changing that narrative, I could totally see how that would, how that would expand that and help people break out of that.
Absolutely.
So, when it comes to that coexistence, you also wrote a paper on Prophet Muhammad's covenant with the Christians, pluralism and civic rights in the first Islamic state. It's very interesting that you use that word, first Islamic state, because right now that's associated with something very different than pluralism and civic rights between the Prophet Muhammad and Christians. So can you talk a little bit about that covenant?
Sure.
And how we can take principles from that and apply it today?
Sure. So when the paper was written, it was 2016. So when it came out, like, ISIS was still, or Daesh was still doing its thing. So the paper actually got a lot of traction, at least in academic and media circles. People were like, wait, so what we see on the news is that's not the Islamic State, So the covenant, it's actually, there's a set of covenants. The primary one is based at St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt.
Okay.
And there's a really good 60 minutes. I'm sure you're familiar with the 60 minutes. But just YouTube it, Covenant of Muhammad at St. Catherine's Monastery, and you can see it. So
it's called St. Catherine's, and it's located at the foot of Mount Sinai, where, according to tradition, Moses received the Ten Commandments. He showed us the monastery's collection of Byzantine icons, the largest and oldest collection in the world. Then he took us to what the patriarch really wanted us to see, a little-known letter written by the Prophet Muhammad almost 1,400 years ago, signed and sealed with his handprint, offering protection and religious freedom to the Christians of the monastery.
These are precedents from Muhammad himself for toleration and peace among people of differing faiths.
Muhammad, when he was creating this new kind of society, he was a revolutionary, and he was kind of uplifting things, and he wrote to a bunch of Christian leaders asking them to enter into an agreement in which he would be recognized as an authority figure, basically like a president or a powerful figure leading a nation. And what these covenants effectively do is they provide complete freedom of religion, right? They grant things like property rights for Christians, and some of these things at the time, like that's kind of unheard of. But the reason why I chose the term religious pluralism instead of toleration is because when you tolerate a certain religious community, it's like, okay, Sean, like, you have your religion, I have my religion, like, it's all good. You can do your thing, I'm going to do my thing. I mean, that's generally a good thing. But Muhammad said in the covenants, like, if a Christian church falls into disrepair, it's a commandment of mine on Muslims to help Christians repair the church.
Wow.
Right? So the covenants, that's the spirit of the covenants. It's not just like, hey, like, I'm your new ruler and these are your rights. It was more mutually inclusive.
Yeah.
And Muhammad, I think, was getting to a bigger point. It's like, if one member, and he said this, there's one of his sayings, you know, if one member of the, or one body of the Ummah is hurting, then the entirety of the Ummah is hurting. And like, honestly, my understanding of the term Ummah, I don't even think the term Ummah is exclusive to Islam or to Muslims. Like, I think his idea of the Ummah was just literally that vision of society that he wanted, and anyone could live in it. Yeah, right? Totally. And like that was the framework. So, you know, these are powerful covenants, and they need to be. There's issues around their historicity and authenticity with, because these documents are so old. Yeah, that's inevitably going to happen. But you know, it reminds us that some of our values, our Western values, were not created by white European men during the Enlightenment. You know? Shocker. Shocker.
Shocker. That's awesome. Hey, I feel like we had a really good discussion. I definitely learned a lot. I'm definitely going to, you know, when you chuck up the deuces, it's a peace sign. Yeah. And we say salam. So that's definitely going to be kind of the new understanding going into things, you know, peace be upon you. And before we leave, deuce.
That's it. Deuce.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Imam Ali tells Malik, know that people are of two types. They are either your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity. And in another line he says, and this line should be cemented on the walls of our mosques: know, O Muslims, our enemy is not the Christians or the Jews. Our enemy is our own ignorance. When he walks past the church, his companion says to him, I wonder how much polytheism is being done by the people of the church. Imam says, I wonder how much monotheism is being worshipped. One looked at the cup half empty. Ali would look at the cup half full.